Senator Corker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will say I've never attended a budget meeting before, and I assume it's only on the first day that people make partisan comments, and then after that we move towards trying to solve the problem. So I'm looking forward to that. Mr. Elmendorf, in your assumptions, you assume that the extenders, the tax extenders that we keep extending, will not be extended. Is that correct?
That's right. We follow current law, Senator. Of course, it's not an assessment by us of the probabilities of things happening. We follow current law.
Mm-hmm. And you also assume that we're actually going to enact SGR as it's written.
Again, we follow current law in which payments to doctors fall.
I understand that. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. So, in essence, we're probably $1 trillion at least on those two topics worse off than your projections say. Is that correct?
If Congress were to freeze Medicare's payments to doctors, that would raise the deficit by about $130 billion over the coming decade. And if you were to extend all the expiring tax provisions, that would add about $900 billion to the deficit, directly, both of them, and then there would be interest costs alongside of that as well.
So a famous Republican politician once said deficits don't matter, but they do matter, don't they?
Yes, Senator, they do.
And the reason they matter is they, as you've mentioned, once you get to full recovery, they affect economic growth. Is that correct?
Yes. They also affect it in weak conditions, but in a rather different way.
And so deficits and debt over time actually directly affect the standard of living of the American people. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Very directly.
I mean, economists are, I think, have a very strong view about that. Whether people see that, I think, is less clear, but I think the effect seems to us to be quite strong.
So our inability to somehow figure out a way collectively to solve this problem and being unwilling, if you will, to take the steps that most of us know we have to take really is hurting the standard of living of Americans.
I think over time, standard of living would be higher than otherwise if deficits were smaller.
Okay, so thank you. Deficits affect the standard of living of Americans. Debt affects the standard of living of Americans. Tell me the impact from your standpoint of increased taxes on the economy and on the standard of living of Americans.
Well, so the direct effect, of course, if people pay higher taxes, they have less after-tax income. And as you know, Senator, if the government cuts benefits to people, then they have less income for that reason as well. That's why this deficit problem is a hard one to confront, because people pay taxes and they also receive the benefits. And as Senator Ayotte noted, the vast majority of the growth in spending on federal outlays is in benefit programs. And so you and your colleagues face a difficult set of choices, I think.
But the actual, just the net effect of taxes themselves, tell me the effect that it has on economic growth, increased taxes.
Oh, so if higher tax rates on work or on saving will tend to discourage work and saving, and that would tend to reduce economic growth. And in our modeling of the effects of changes in fiscal policies on the economy, we try to capture the effects of changes in deficits, but also the effects of changes in incentives through the tax code as it affects work and saving. And in fact, transfer programs can have effects on incentives as well, and we try to capture those in our modeling also.
So debt and deficits hurt the standard of living of Americans by slowing economic growth, and increased taxes on work, and I think you're very specific there, on work, affect the standard of living of Americans because they also slow economic growth. So we have quite a challenge, don't we?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, and I hope we'll come together and figure out a way of solving that. Have we had a situation you project in this budget window that net interest spending, and someone's already alluded to this, will be that more than defense spending? Have we ever had a situation like that in the history of our country?
I don't think so, Senator, but I can't be sure offhand.
And mandatory spending you project during this budget window, that's on autopilot that we don't deal with on an annual basis, will be 14.2% of GDP in the year 2025, and the average amount for the last 50 years that we've spent relative to GDP and all government spending has been 20.1. Have we ever had that situation before?
No, Senator. The government has set in place a set of programs that provide benefits to older Americans and help people obtain health care. And with a greatly increasing number of older Americans and with rising costs of health care, those programs that people are accustomed to are getting much more expensive in the aggregate. And that really is the key factor that's pushing up mandatory spending.
And I'll close, Mr. Chairman, with this question and a quick statement. Do you remember a situation in your lifetime where you look at a 10-year budget window and you look at the mandatory spending component, which has been put in place by both sides of the aisle, the issues relative to debt and deficits? Have we ever faced a situation like this that you can remember with more difficult choices?
No, Senator. I think what's strikingly different now from the past discussions of this topic 10, 20 years ago, at which point the demographic changes, of course, were foreseen. What's different now is that our debt is already equal to more than 70% of GDP. And that's a level of debt that we've only seen in this country for a few years around the end of the Second World War. And that makes the situation quite different from other times at which this question has arisen.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know everybody's sort of staking out their territory today and sort of taking pot shots. I do look at this Budget Committee as being a serious committee, and I hope that over the course of the next 2 months, we'll figure out a way to come together and actually deal with these issues in a way that is meaningful so that our lack of action does not continue to hurt the American people. Thank you.